All right, so what we've been working on so far in this chapter are all those interior and exterior angle relationships. Some of the interior, some of the exterior, each exterior, how the interior and exterior are related to each other, all that type of stuff. Okay. Today, 814 is basically a practice day with making all of the connections of if I know the number of sides, how can I find the how can I go through and find the interior angles? How can I find the exterior angles? If I know the exterior angle, how can I find the number of sides? How all that stuff is connected. Okay, so and that's all that is, regular polygon angle connection. So if we take a look, what I want you to do first off is do the warm up. This shouldn't take you more than hopefully just a couple of minutes is all. But start with the warm up. We'll go over that, and then we'll get into what I want you to do today for the lesson. Those people that still have phones and stuff out that you're not using as a calculator, let's put those away, please, and start working on this. If you didn't grab a warm-up, make sure you come on up and grab a warm-up then. Going back to some Chapter 7 stuff. Use your kite properties to solve for missing angles. All right, let's take a look. Let's see what you came up with for the warm-up here. Like I said, it shouldn't take you too long to do this. If you remember the properties, and there's really one property that you needed to remember in particular, a couple of them that you need, but one in particular, and that is that the longer diagonal, remember, is a line of reflection, and therefore you can reflect anything, in this case, anything that's on the bottom half, you can make that your line of reflection. So therefore, this is a 38-degree angle. This 65 degrees comes up, and we don't really need it, but would also reflect up to here if we needed it. Okay, oops, let's get rid of that. Didn't even read that. So that would be 65. Like I said, I don't necessarily need that part. There's one other property that I need to know of, and what is it? Colin?
The middles are all 90 degrees.
Yep, the two diagonals of a kite are always perpendicular to each other. So we know that we've got 4 right triangles right here. And therefore, now you solve for both x and y the same way. You're doing the triangle sum in each one of those triangles. So in this case, if we start with x, you should find that x is, what do we get, 25? Yeah. X is 25 degrees, and y is what? 52? Did I do the math right in my head? And there's your 2 answers right there. So part of the reason, a lot of times, the warm-up is usually consisting of one of 2 things. Either stuff from the current chapter that we're trying to just bring back up again, or, like this problem, stuff from previous chapters where, because remember, the geometric connection standard will be basically the quadrilateral properties and the coordinate geometry and that kind of stuff. So we want to make sure we're still working on these types of problems and still bringing this stuff back. So that you're still going through that type of stuff. It's also in your practice to learn. Okay, that's the nice part about the spiraling in the practice to learn. So you've got all that practice that's there as well. Okay? So there's our warm-up for today. Let me go to the actual. So here is the toolkit. If you have not done so, why don't you take that out right now? Take out your green toolkits. Polygons and circles one. So far we got all the polygon stuff on there. We'll do the circle stuff on the backside when we get to it. And what I'm going to tell you to do is, if you're sitting at your table and you don't have the entire front side filled out like this, take a picture of the TV right now with your iPad, your phone, whatever, because that's what should be on the front side. So if you're missing any of those boxes, take a picture so that you have it, and then you can transfer it to your toolkit so that it's there. So like I said, the practice today is really going to be, how do I know which formula to use when? How do I solve for side lengths? How do I find interior angles, exterior angles? We did a little bit of that yesterday already. Okay, we were kind of getting going yesterday a little bit. We're going to continue with that. So if you take your warm-up and you turn it over to the back side, okay, it's a little bit small. Okay, it's a little bit hard to read. It's a little small, but what you're going to need is there. So if you notice, 814 is the connection that is made between everything we've talked about. That's really what we're looking at. So if you notice you probably can't read it, but you can take a look up here if you need to. So during lessons 811 to 813, you've discovered several ways the number of sides of a regular polygon is related to the measures of interior and exterior angles of the polygon. These relationships can be represented in the diagram at the right. How can these relationships be useful? What is the most efficient way to go from one measurement to the other? And this lesson is going to explore those questions. Okay? So if you notice, what they're talking about is that idea. If I know one of those three things, if I know the number of sides, I should be able to find the measure of an interior angle and the measure of an exterior angle. If I know the measure of an interior angle, you should be able to then find the other two. If you know the measure of an exterior angle, you should be able to find the other two. And that's, like I said, that's really what this lesson is about. If I know one of those three, how can I use it to find the other pieces of information? Okay? So here's what I want you to do. We're going to, for the most part, like I said, it's going to be a practice day today. What I'm going to have you do is this. At the top, in 836, like I said, I know it's fairly small, but you should still be able to read it, even though it's fairly small. I want you to work through your way through parts A, B, C, and D. Okay? Then, after that, I want you to go to the bottom slide and start working your way through those and just kind of practicing how do I find certain pieces of information. Once everybody, or at least the majority of people, get through 836, we'll kind of quickly come back and discuss and then move on to the next part. Otherwise, I have the answer key here, and what I'll do is once you go through and you've got a few done and you want me to check your answers, just call me over, and I will gladly come around and do that, just to make sure you're understanding what you need to understand and you're getting things done correctly. Okay? As always, you've got some people around you, hopefully, that you feel at least somewhat comfortable with. You're welcome to work together. Okay? As a matter of fact, I encourage you working together, so helping each other out. If you get stuck, ask the person sitting next to you. If nobody can figure it out, call me over and I'll gladly help you out. Okay? But worst thing you can do, I'm going to keep coming back to this, is just sit there and do nothing. Okay? That's the worst thing you can do if you get stuck, is just try to avoid and just sit there and do nothing. Ask questions. Keep working. Work your way forward. Okay? So starting right now, I want you to work on 836 and see what you can come up with from there. Okay? Let's go to work. Does anybody in this class still need either the green toolkit or the practice to learn? Anybody that was not here last week to get it? Okay. All right. See what you can come up with. Let's see if you can get the answers that you need to. one of the hints I'll always give you is remember sometimes it's easier to use the exterior angle than it is to use the interior angle, even though that might be the given information. So just keep that in mind. Sometimes it's easier. And if you do want this bigger so you can read it a little bit better, you can bring this up. This is 814 if you want to go into the ebook and you'd rather have it in front of you so you can see it a little bit better.
Use this sheet basically to get this formula.
I was just using this for fun.
And that's what because you're not gonna be able to use that to memorize that, that's what this formula will do.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I want you to start getting used to what you're gonna be able to use when you do the test. And that sheet was just to get to that formula as always. Okay. So try to stay away from that and use your tool if you can.
If you get some answers, like I said, have me come on over. I will gladly check and see how you're doing.
No, so this is the sum of all 15 thoughts. And then we divide it by 15. So that
Okay. One baby. 15 started okay? So 13.
Yeah, we
Remember, look for those keywords. Some versus each. Interior versus exterior. That should narrow it down to which formula you want to use. Okay, look for some of those keywords.
Wait, hold on.
4 for 4. Good work. Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead. What do you got?
So it's 1.
Yep, those are both right. Good.
So I don't have to do 1.
All correct.
Yeah, no, I just did wrong.
Otherwise you're making sense. So now, what does this give you? Go ahead and do it. Yeah, so
Oh, this is how many sides you want.
There's a couple ways you go about this. So you could, if they tell you that each interior
So don't overthink this. Notice we're looking for an exterior angle of 10. I'm making some little here, just divided.
They're good as anything.
So you were on my own project, was part of that equation. So you can take this one and set it equal to 162. Really wanted to do is like 162 over 1, and then you got a program AB to get plus B to minus alpha. Just rolling along here, huh?
This one I got stuck.
Let's see where the second part here. I'm going to try to get on because of that, because we don't do it. So probably, I would say probably the easiest part would be when it says to find, when it says each interior angle is 2x plus 4. Figure out what each exterior angle could equal. In a regular pattern. And therefore, if we put 2x plus 4 equal to whatever it is. Does that make sense? What are we doing here, gentlemen? Looks like it.
For sure. So, for this one, the north side is 24, right? Because you divide.
Yeah, those are all actually all 4 of those are good. These are all right.
Right.
Yep, you're good. How are you doing, Chase? Look for, again, are you talking about sum or are you talking about each angle? Are you looking for interior or exterior? That should basically kind of guide you which one of these we're referring to. Okay.
All right, let's take a look real quickly at the first 4 here. I think most people are close to being done with those first 4 questions, or at least somewhere along those lines. So let's kind of discuss this fairly quickly and see where we're at, and then I'm going to let you work on the second part of it and go from there. So 836, if you take a look, if you know the number of sides of a regular polygon, how can you find the measure of an interior angle directly? So they ask you to find the measurements of an interior angle. So I told you some key words. When you're trying to figure out which formula do I use, what am I working with, key parts to this. You're finding the measurement of an interior angle and a 15 gon, which means an interior angle, if we go back to our toolkit for a second, which one of these 4 formulas deals with an interior angle? We take a look out of those 4. Well, if you notice right here, they use each rather than an, but we're talking about interior angles, therefore it's got to be one of these 2. And I'm not looking for the sum, I'm talking about each individual angle. I'm talking about 1, okay? And so this is the formula that we're going to end up using, where we take the sum and then divide it equally amongst all the angles since it's a regular polygon. So on this first problem, if we go through and we know we've got a 15 gon and I want to find what each angle equals, we figure out what's the sum of all of the angles first and then divide it by 15. So in this case, we would do 180 times n minus 2, so 15 minus 2. That will give me the sum of all of the 15 angles, which, by the way, if you do that, should be 2,340 is what you should come up with. And then I want each angle. I don't want all of them total. I want to find each one individually. So because it's a regular polygon, we can divide it equally amongst the 15 angles. And you should get an answer of 156 degrees for that problem. Okay? Each one of those 15 angles should be 156 degrees of your 15 gon. The key part that I want you to understand is not necessarily the answer. It's how do I get to that answer? How do I know what to use when? How do I know what to plug in? That's what we're working on today. It's trying to filter through that process. Take a look at part B. Let's look for some of those, let's kind of highlight some of those words. Find the measurements of an exterior angle of a 10 gon. That means we're talking about each exterior angle. Okay? 1, not necessarily the sum, and we know the number of sides is 10. So we come back up and we take a look at our toolkit. We're taking a look at this box right here. each exterior angle of a regular polygon. That's what I'm looking for. Knowing that I have 10 sides. So we plug in 10 for n, and we get an answer. Okay? So in that one, 360 is the sum of all 10 exterior angles. We divide it equally amongst those 10, and therefore, each exterior angle is 36 degrees. So again, looking for those key words. You're going to keep hearing me come back to that. There's definitely words in every problem that'll help you. When you look at part C, this one's a little bit tricky because this one you can actually do two different ways. So notice it says, if you know the measure of an interior angle is 162, how many sides does that have? Or how many sides must it have? Okay, so keywords here, if we start kind of the direct way. We'll do it the direct way first, then we'll talk about the indirect way again. So in this case, when it says, again, keywords and interior angle, and then we know that that's 162. Well, going back to my toolkit, here's your formula that talks about each interior angle. And not the sum, each one of them. So that 162 would go right there in that formula. Okay? We know each angle. So I'm going to plug that in, and I will then solve the equation for n. We'll try to figure out how many sides does this actually have. Okay? So I'm going to kind of come down here because it's a little bit more work than we would need to for the space that I have. So if we do that, we know we've got 180 times n minus 2 divided by n. That would normally give you what each angle would equal, but we already know the answer to that. Each angle is 162 degrees. To make this solving a little bit easier, so that you recognize it a little bit more, I'm going to write this as 162 over 1, and now you've got a proportion, which we've been solving all the way since chapter 1. Okay? So now we can cross multiply to get an equation, and then solve that resulting equation. So if we do that, when I cross multiply the 162 times the n, we end up with 162n. When I multiply the other diagonal, I'm really just multiplying by 1. So what I'm going to do is actually take this 180 and distribute it into the parentheses. So equal to 180n minus 360. There's your resulting equation when you cross multiply. And now from here we can solve. Okay? I'm going to get the n's on the same side. So subtract 180n. Those cancel. 162 minus 180 gives you a negative 18n equal to a negative 360. And we finish it off, divide both sides by negative 18. And those cancel. And in this case would equal 20. So in this scenario, when they ask you how many sides must the polygon have if each one of the regular interior angles is 162 degrees, that has to be a 20-gon. It's got to be a 20-sided shape. Okay? Now, I told you this would be how you can find it directly. I told you there's a different way where you can find it indirectly, and it's actually a lot easier. Anybody do it that way? Anybody tell me what I'm talking about here? There's a much easier way to do this problem. We did it yesterday. We did it as one of our examples yesterday. Huh?
Since it said that the interior angle was 162.
Yep.
I took 180 minus 162 to get the exterior angle, and then it said that all the exterior angles are up to 360, so I just divided 360 by 18.
Okay. That's exactly, so in this case, we know that each interior angle is 162. Well, remember, interior plus exterior, they're always supplementary. So that means the exterior angle that goes with it must be 18 degrees. Because they have to add up to 180. And, like Colin said, we know that the sum of all the exterior angles have to add up to 360. So all I have to do is figure out how many times does 18 go into 360, and that'll tell me the number of sides. So if I take 360 divided by 18, you get the exact same answer of 20. And that's a whole lot easier than going through and setting up the first equation and solving for all of that. It's not like you can't do it. In this case, it's just a lot more efficient to use the interior angle to get the exterior one, okay? And that, when I was talking before about this kind of regular polygon web, that's one of the points that they're trying to make today. Is sometimes, even though you know the interior angle, it might be easier to then find the exterior angle that goes with it and use that to find the number of sides, okay? Either way, you can get to the answer. It's just a lot easier if you use the exterior angle on that problem, okay? And so finally in part D then, part of the reason I brought that up is, in part D they say if the measure of an exterior angle is 15 degrees, how many sides does it have? And now we're kind of doing exactly what we just talked about. Take 360 divided by 15, which means in this case, n would equal 24. If you divide 360 by 15, into each exterior angle, and then the corresponding interior angle, they always add up to 180, so therefore the interior angle would equal 165. And there's your two answers for that part. In this case, using the exterior angle. It's almost always, if you have a regular polygon, it's almost always easier to use the exterior angle to find stuff than it is to use the interior angle. Okay, so just kind of a heads up on that. Before I move on to anything else, any other questions that you want to go over, or anything else up here that does not make sense before we move on? Anything that we just did that you're looking at that and saying, I have no clue what you just wrote down? Okay, so then what I want you to do then is, I wanted to have an opportunity to at least kind of come back together, discuss, and now what I want you to then to do is go down to that bottom slide, problem 838, and now do those 5 problems, okay? A, B, C, D, and E. And that'll take you, again, I'll come around and I'll check answers, and that'll take us kind of to the end of the lesson. Once I have checked off that you've got all of the answers correct, then at that point, if you want to take out your practice to learn, or you want to start working on the Delta Math from last week, if you haven't done that, I'm fine with that. But I need to come around before you start working on something else and make sure that you can do this. Okay, make sure you can do this correctly. All right, let's go to work on that. I will come around right now.